Today's video will be something a little bit different. One of the things about amateur radio is that there's always something new to learn. Tony Long, KC6QHP, a member of the PAPA System radio network here in Southern California in the San Diego region, gave a presentation on all of the activity that's happening above 1 gigahertz in the microwave ham bands. And I wanted to share it with you. I learned a lot, and maybe you will too. He's been doing it for about 30 years, and it's a whole other world of communicating that most of us are not familiar with. If you enjoy the outdoors, you'll want to hear Tony's talk.
All right, I realize that I'm in the way of lunch, so I will keep this brief, but if you have questions, please interrupt me. I've been doing this for close to 30 years now, and I'm not an expert on microwave, but I'll give you my perspective and my opinion and my experience. So, all right, just a little bit of background. So I'm a San Diego native, born here. That's my dad and me when I was about 2 years old at the Balboa Park train, and that's me and my dad recently. I dragged my dad into ham radio when I was about 11 years old. I was in Boy Scouts and wasn't my thing, so I decided to drop out and get into ham radio and dragged my dad along to classes and got my license, and that's kind of been the story of my life ever since. All right, so we're here today to talk about life above 1 gigahertz, and those are really, super high frequency and extremely high frequency bands. We're all used to HF, VHF, UHF. This is the next level up. So super high frequencies, SHF is considered 3 to 30 gigahertz, and EHF is 30 to 300 gigahertz. And as much as it's sort of hidden down here, that's not very good. Most of the amateur radio spectrum that exists is above 1 gigahertz, like 99% of it. So we're underusing it, and my goal here today is to try and encourage you guys to come out and participate and get on the air and help save some of these frequencies, because there are lots of uses outside of amateur radio for the microwave bands. In fact, I would say almost all RF applications today occur above 1 gigahertz. Cell phones, of course, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, you name it. Nearly everything in space. I'd say probably 99% of our wireless infrastructure, lunch, radar, being able to exchange memes on your smartphone, radio astronomy, it just goes on and on and on. All kinds of applications for this bandwidth, and so we need to stake our claim and make sure we keep using it. Okay, so what is microwave ham radio like? If you've never done microwave radio, it might seem mysterious. It's not usually this, so you're not usually stuck at home with a big tower and radio. You're not usually stuck inside, rag chewing or contesting for extended periods of time. And it's typically not really that involved in emergency communications. It's more like this. It's more like going out to a mountaintop, getting up and enjoying the beauty of nature that surrounds you because you're up high, taking equipment that you've built in your shack and cobbled together from pieces, and trying to talk to people. And you do it kind of rarely because it takes a lot to get everybody out of their shacks, bring their equipment up, schedule around everything else that they've got going on. It also might look like this. Stopped on the side of the road at a convenient location. He's got a computer, and he may be using one of the digital modes. So those are becoming popular now, especially like Q65, to get the really low signal to noise ratio. Or it might look like this. That's me several years ago, I think on top of Fraser Mountain with a 3-band setup that's 10, 24, and 47 gigahertz there. And very recently, you can now buy equipment that allows you to install it permanently. So the ICOM 905, if you're familiar with that, is a radio that covers up through 10 gigahertz, and I think they're coming out with a 24 gigahertz module soon. So ham radio microwave is becoming much more accessible thanks to some recent introductions of commercial gear. A lot of gear you got to build, and I've got some equipment up here that I'll show you guys later if you want to walk around and talk about it, and I'll mention a little bit about it. But you do a lot of making. So if you like building radio gear, if you like experimenting and learning stuff, this is a really, really good facet of the hobby to get into. There's endless experimentation opportunities. All right, so I've been kind of talking about this. Why might you like microwave ham radio? Do you seek a technical challenge? If so, microwaves are definitely going to have that. Do you want a new operating challenge? And this is, how do you speak on the radio? How do you predict propagation? How do you coordinate with other people? How do you, make contacts? It's a completely different challenge than any other type of ham radio. Do you like the outdoors? Do you like being outside? Well, it's kind of necessary for most microwave ham radio. And if you like building things, because especially if you want to go above 10 gigahertz, it's almost impossible to just buy something outright that's going to work. So why might you not like amateur microwave radio? Well, there's a very, very high dollars per QSO ratio here. This radio over here, this 122 gigahertz radio, I've probably got about $500 into that radio, and I've made contacts with 2 people on it. So that's pretty typical when you get to those high frequencies. The operations are infrequent but intense. So if you like getting on the radio often, microwave's probably not the right thing for you. And it can be very intense when you do get on. It's really serious stuff because people have spent all year, they've got their pent-up demand for making contacts. It's also not as social on the air as other facets of amateur radio. Most of the time when you're doing microwave, it's in a contest kind of environment, and so it's exchanging very basic information. I will say it is a very social aspect of amateur radio because you've got to know who else you're going to be talking to. You've got to understand what their equipment is, and so there's a lot of off-the-air socializing. All right, one of my personal goals is to work all the bands, of which there are 30-something. In green here are radios that are easily purchased. In red are radios that are very difficult to purchase. Yellow is somewhere in between. So it's a challenge, like I said. If you want to get on these bands, there's also the challenge at the extreme opposite end, right? The extremely low frequency stuff. So I'd say that 11 of the bands require that you build something because there is no commercial available stuff to get on the air. And then when you get up to the really, really high frequencies, 241 gigahertz is probably the hardest band. There's, I would say, less than 25 people in the world who have made contacts on that band. It's incredibly difficult from an equipment perspective, and I'll explain why. All right, so some broad characterizations about the bands. 1.2 gigahertz. How many people in here have made a contact on 1.2 gigs? A couple, okay. It's popular for EME. You can get hundreds of watts of power on this band. It is the highest band that I know of that has active repeaters, and I think there's one in San Diego right now, and I'd like to increase that. There are handheld radios that you can get. These are a couple of different models. There are none in current production that will work on 1.2 gigahertz, so you have to go the eBay route and scour that. You can also build transverters. There are commercial transverters available. And 1.2 gigahertz is great. The propagation is very similar to 900 megahertz and close to UHF as well. 2.3, 3.4, and 5.7 gigahertz I think are kind of the oddball bands. They're not used a whole lot. They are excluded from the annual 10 gigahertz and up contest, but there is some activity during the VHF and UHF contest. Another raise of hands. Anybody who's made contacts on 2.3 through 5.7? Yeah, so you can see nobody. 10 gigahertz. During the 10 gigahertz and up contest, there's about 50 people that get on the air in California every year. And it fluctuates. And there's probably twice that number of people that have equipment available. And I'd say California is one of the hot spots in the country. Texas and the Northeast have some hot spots as well. But it is small numbers for all of these things. 24 and 47 gigahertz are becoming more popular. They are still very limited in number. I would say 24 gigahertz, you've got maybe 10 operators during the contest, and 47, you've got maybe 4. And above that, very few people actually make contacts on these bands ever, let alone during the contest, because they're so difficult to make contacts. The propagation is poor. It's very hard to get any reasonable amount of power. Antenna gain is very high, but that makes the pointing difficult. Also, 76 gigahertz and above, you've got to build your own gear, and it becomes extremely hard to find. And, you know, very fine machining to make some of these things. It's really, really challenging, partially because the commercial applications are so few. All right, so let's talk about propagation. So this is a chart that you may be familiar with. This is absorption of RF energy in the atmosphere. And what's interesting is I've highlighted in yellow the different amateur bands. So 10 gigahertz is 0.02 dB per kilometer. When you get up to 24 gigahertz, it's 10 times worse. And then when you get up to 241 gigahertz, it's 500 times worse than 10 gigahertz. So you've also at 241 gigahertz, unless you're the Department of Defense, you probably don't have access to anything that puts out more than microwatts of power. And so it gets very, very difficult as you go up. 24 gigahertz is particularly bad because you've got a molecular water absorption line there. Interestingly, the 79, 76 gigahertz band is kind of at a dip. So in other words, this chart shows you what you're up against from a propagation standpoint at the microwave bands, and can give you an idea of generally the kind of contacts that you're going to make and the distances that you can reach. Unlike HF, the atmosphere and the ionosphere are basically transparent at microwave bands. So you're not going to get any propagation other than line of sight or diffractive optics kind of things like knife edging over a mountain or bouncing off of a mountain, which are really interesting, but very different from what we think of normally with HF communications. All right, so you're interested maybe, how do you get on the air? Generally speaking, you will use a transverter to take your existing ham radio and shift it up in frequency to somewhere in the microwave band. There are transverters that will convert to 144 megahertz, 28 megahertz, kind of you name it. They're pretty flexible. So as long as you have a radio that can do single sideband on 28 megahertz or above, you can add a transverter and do weak signal communications during the microwave contest. All right, so what's inside of that? Generally speaking, you have your intermediate frequency radio. So this is an HF radio or VHF or UHF radio. And you go into a mixer, and that mixer combines with a high frequency signal from a local oscillator. Then you filter out the thing you want, you amplify that and go to an antenna. Now, at microwave frequencies, all of these things have their unique challenges. A frequency reference is really important for microwave frequencies because you're multiplying that up really, really high, and any drift or variation or phase noise that you have in that reference will be multiplied up and made many times worse at the higher frequencies. So the higher you go, the more important your frequency reference gets. A lot of people will GPS lock their radios. The stuff I have here today is not locked, but it is all using temperature compensated crystal oscillators for the frequency reference. In the last 20 years, the availability of good microwave local oscillators has really, really expanded. 20 years ago, we used to be limited to these really clunky brick oscillators, which were these diode multiplier things. They were really good performance, but they required a lot of power and strange voltages, hard to use, and not flexible in frequency. There's been tremendous advancements in integrated phase lock loop oscillators over the last couple decades, and you can now easily get direct 10 gigahertz synthesis out of these chips. Mixers are still mostly diodes. That hasn't really changed much. Filters, still kind of a challenge. A lot of times we use copper pipe caps on circuit board, which is an interesting approach. And then amplifiers is basically bring money. Getting power at microwave frequencies is hard because generally speaking, silicon devices do not work well above a few gigahertz. So when you get up to 10 gigahertz, you're looking at gallium arsenide or gallium nitride devices, all of which are specialty semiconductors that are produced in small quantities and come with high cost. So if you want to get a 10 watt amplifier for 10 gigahertz, it's going to be about $1,000 or so. And it just goes up from there. All right. So I kind of mentioned this stuff. Transmit power becomes harder to generate as the frequency increases, not just because of the device technology, but also the materials that you use to build this thing. Printed circuit board materials that might work at low frequencies become extremely lossy and poorly behaved at high frequencies. So you've got to use specialty materials that have associated really difficult chemistries to work with, and so many places don't fabricate boards, so you've got to go to specialty places. So everything gets more complicated with generating power. Connectors get expensive. And then also your receive noise figure increases as frequency goes up. So, at 47 gigahertz, a 6 dB noise figure is not bad. At 10 gigahertz, you can get somewhere around a 1 dB noise figure. And at 1 gigahertz, you can get well below half a dB if you're doing EME. And finally, the low phase noise, high stability fundamental oscillators, they are difficult to build at high frequencies. They're getting easier, and I think that's one of the big things that has allowed more people to get into the hobby is the reduction in cost of the local oscillators in particular. All right, so talk a little bit about building radios for microwave contesting. So first we've got to talk about what the 10 gigahertz and up microwave contest is. So this is the main activity event for hams that are interested in 10 gigahertz and above every year. It is a contest that occurs 2 weekends out of the year, the third weekend in August and the third weekend in September. And they have 2 of these because the guess is that you go out in August and you find the problems with your equipment. And then you have time to fix it, and you get back out in September, and then you can make contacts. It is a really interesting, unusual contest. I'd say it's more like soccer than basketball in terms of points. If you make, 50 QSOs in a weekend, that's doing pretty good actually. Versus an HF contest where you're hoping to do that maybe every hour or 2. Contacts are mostly prearranged, as Chris mentioned. We use the cactus repeater system for historical reasons, and it is a madhouse when you're trying to arrange those contacts because you've got all 50 of the people in California trying to work on one audio channel, trying to coordinate back and forth. So people are stepping on each other. It's a full duplex system, so it's just chaos. And a lot of people are turned off to microwave contesting because of that difficulty in arranging a contact. You've got this kind of 80-20 rule, where 20% of the people use 80% of the bandwidth to make their contacts. And so it's a challenge. There are a number of things going on right now to address that. There's a Western States DMR network has a microwave talk group now, and that was used successfully during the last microwave contest. It's still not widely used, but that actually is a good thing because if you want to have clear airspace, it's there. There's also N6MX, a friend of mine up in LA is building an app that will allow your smartphone to coordinate specifically for microwave contests. So it is becoming more accessible because people are seeing that this is a bottleneck for operation during those contests. The 10 gigahertz contest is what I call a multimodal intense. You're doing a lot of different things. You're coordinating with other people to figure out who you're going to contact and when. You've got to think about, okay, the group on Fraser Mountain has a queue of people, and you've got to make sure you get your name in there. You've got people in Arizona who are only going to be up for a certain amount of time. You got rovers in Central California. So you got to keep in your mind, keep track of what all is going on. You got to be listening to the UHF system to figure out, did somebody have a hiccup? Did somebody's equipment break? Then you've got to operate your own equipment, which is stuff that, again, you've cobbled together at home and use infrequently, so you're probably not super familiar with it. Things are going to break. You might have to fix it. There's a lot of planning that goes on for the month or so before the contest. People figure out where they're going to go, so there's strategy involved in that. You have to be a good listener for these weak signal contacts. They are generally single sideband or CW contacts, and usually right at the noise floor for the longer distance ones. And there's some social engineering that goes on too. How do you sort of advertise to people and coordinate with people that you're going to be at a certain place to attract contacts to you? That 20% that I mentioned take the contest very seriously because it is their one opportunity a year to get out. It is the one opportunity to use their equipment that they've spent tons of money and time building. And so there's people who really are seriously into it. So if you're casually into it, that's great. We need more people on the air and we're trying to make the casual first-time users more comfortable doing it. But just be aware that if you get into this, there are people who are really, really serious about it. It's best to go out with an experienced operator at least a few times before you go out on your own to get the lay of the land, understand how things work and the flow of the day, the flow of a contact, and so on. There's just a lot to do. As I mentioned, it can be incredibly frustrating. I hope I'm not being too negative with this talk because it's coming off as this is a difficult thing. But it also can be very rewarding because once you've overcome all these challenges of building equipment in your shack, of driving it up a dirt road up to the top of a mountain, of setting it up and coordinating, and you make these contacts, it's really, really fun, especially when you can look at all these really interesting propagation modes, like point to the east and bounce off of a thunderstorm. And the weird sound that you get, it's a smeared Doppler effect where it just sounds really weird, and you sometimes are forced to use CW or even FM. You can bounce off mountaintops, you can bounce off objects like water towers, you can bounce off airplanes, and if you have a waterfall display on your radio, you can see the airplanes moving by in a diagonal because of the Doppler shift they're creating. So it's just fascinating stuff that you see. And even during the day, as the weather changes, you can start to see differences in propagation patterns. So it's a really, really interesting experience. I've been doing the microwave contest almost every year since about 1994, and there's always something new and fun about it. All right, so the typical contest operating environment. Fraser Mountain is one of the most popular places in Southern California to operate from. It's got excellent visibility north and south. It's high. It's just a great spot. So I've gone up there a number of times. When you're up there, you're at high altitude. Generally speaking, there's no power available, so you got to bring your own. Sometimes if somebody knows somebody with a repeater shack, they will run extension cords. Generally, you're also in a place where it's an RF dense environment. And if you're communicating on UHF, your radios are likely to get desensitized. So you have to be careful of what radios you bring up. The really lower end UHF handhelds oftentimes won't cut it. Mount Soledad is a particularly bad place for that. So those are just some of the considerations. You're also likely to drive up a dirt road, so your equipment has to survive a bumpy ride. All right, some mechanical considerations. So this radio here that you see is about, I'd say that's about 8 feet tall when it's fully deployed, and that is my contesting 10 and 24 gigahertz radio. I didn't bring it today because I didn't want to bring it in with the rain, and it is not waterproof, so I didn't want to destroy years of work. The dish is a 1 meter diameter fiberglass dish that I rescued from, gosh, it's so long ago. It was a surplus dish from somewhere. And then everything else is pretty much built. It's set on a very heavy duty tripod. It's a quick set Hercules, I think. The whole thing weighs probably 150 pounds. And so you have to consider a lot of things from a mechanical standpoint. You've got to be able to point this thing accurately. At 10 gigahertz, this thing has maybe a 2 or 3 degree beam width. And at 24 gigahertz, it's half a degree, which is why I built both bands into the same radio using the same feed, because I can line up on 10 gigahertz and then I'm set on 24. There's also a wind load issue, right? This disc of 1 meter in diameter is going to pick up the wind like crazy. So the whole thing has to be really robust. You have to align the thing. So, adjustments of just a few millimeters can get you out of the phase center of the dish and ruin your gain. So the whole thing has to be mechanically rigid enough to hold its alignment over the bumpy road that you're going up. You also have to keep your feed lines short. Virtually all the microwave equipment in this thing is right here at the feed. And so I have very short feed lines. Everything over here is like power supplies and reference oscillators. This one's GPS locked. I have my IF radios up here. And so all the microwave gear is up here. There's a 10 gigahertz transverter here with an 8-watt amplifier, and then my 24 gigahertz transverter is literally right behind the feed and has about a 4-inch feed line. So even with the best feed lines, you're still going to get a lot of loss at these frequencies, and that loss is just going to eat into your noise figure and output power. Okay, lots of equipment to manage during a microwave contest, so you've got to design for usability as well. You've got your IF radios. In this case, I've got a FT817 and FT290, I think. that I'm using for the two different bands. I've got my transmit switches easily identified. I've got multiple power options, and everything is just easily in place. This year I added a sun shield to the top of it to keep the IF radios cool. But you've got to keep all these things at the ready, because you're just constantly between radios and writing stuff down and pointing and talking to other people that might be with you and so on. So designing for ergonomic considerations is important. All right, this is like one of my last slides here. I know everybody's eager to have lunch. I'm going to talk about a couple of these radios that I brought today. So one of the newer things that's happening in the microwave, especially the 10 gigahertz arena, is these smaller radios that are easier to take around. So that one that I have that I showed you is obviously something that takes a full day operation in one spot. I'm not going to pick that up and move it around. This one I built specifically for backpack operation, and I built a backpack that this thing straps onto, and it holds all the gear. This is a complete 10 gigahertz station right here. I'm using a QRP Labs QMX transceiver as the IF radio, and I've got a battery that plugs in and out like so. And then I fabricated this dish from scratch, and that was quite an endeavor to do that. But I learned about working with composites. So this is a fiberglass dish. I've also been working with carbon fiber to make them, and electroplating to figure out how to make a good surface. So again, there's endless opportunities to learn about fabrication. The 10 gigahertz transverter is in here, and then this is a section of waveguide. Funny story about the waveguide. So most of the time people buy waveguide from surplus sources, but up in El Segundo, there is a store that sells waveguide. And I walked in one day, and I think I was the first person to do a walk-in purchase of waveguide, because it's almost exclusively commercial or government people that are ordering this stuff. I just walked in and was like, hey, do you have any WR90? And they're like, sure. So weird things happen. So this again is a full 10 gigahertz transceiver, radio on the back, transverter up here. There are a couple others out there now that people have built. There's one that I actually helped build. Is this little tiny thing for a guy that's a friend of mine who loves to do soda operations. And so he needed the absolute smallest microwave radio possible. And that's inspired some other people. So there are a lot of interesting things happening right now. This radio is a 122 gigahertz radio. And you'll notice there's no dish on this thing. This is using a lens. So this is a dielectric lens. It's a slab of Teflon that's been machined into a lens, and actually gives you I think it's about 30 dB of gain at 122 gigahertz right here. Back here is a little horn, and then what does the 122 gigahertz is there's a little printed circuit board inside there with a chip that is a automotive radar chip, and that's it. You use a FM receiver to listen, and the microphone directly goes inside. There's a group in Australia that has been working on this, and they've made a batch of boards, and so now there's several dozen people around the world on 122 gigahertz. They're also working on a dual band 122, 134 gigahertz radio chip, and that is something I'm eagerly anticipating. Over here, again, come take a look at this later. This is my briefcase 10 gigahertz radio. And then I have another software-defined radio over here, which is a really interesting way to get on the microwave bands. Use a Raspberry Pi and a Analog Devices Pluto SDR, and that will actually work up to 6 gigahertz. And you can even use some techniques to get it up to work at 10 gigahertz poorly, but it will. So come and take a look at the gear. If you would like to get on 10 gigahertz, you can make a contact right here. So we've got 2 radios on 10 gigahertz if you want to make your first X-band contact. If you want to try 1.2 gigahertz, you can do that too. Let's see. So if you're interested in getting on microwave bands, luckily San Diego is home to one of the best microwave clubs. Phil back there is a regular attendee to the San Diego Microwave Group meetings. They're held the the third Monday of the month at the home of Carrie N6IZW in La Mesa. And Carrie has been running these meetings for, I think, 40 years. It's a very informal group that gets together and just helps one another get on the bands. I got into the microwave world by going to one of these meetings when I was in high school, and I got all the equipment that I needed, surplus stuff that I had to, build and work on and learn. But it's all doable, and it can be very cheap if you are willing to build stuff. If you refuse to build anything and you have deep pockets, go buy an ICOM IC905, and for somewhere around $5,000 or $6,000, you too can get on 10 gigahertz and other bands. All right, so any questions or concerns, issues?
What kind of range can you get out of something?
Yeah, good question. So it's really interesting. The big radio that I have, I will take this one with it sometimes. And I would say that at least 90% of the contacts that I do on the big radio, I can do with this one. So this has got a 3-watt amplifier, 1-foot dish, much, much smaller aperture, but you can work hundreds of miles with this. My longest DX on 10 gigahertz is 1,000 kilometers with 1 watt. Back in the early 2000s, there was a group that would go down to Central Baja and set up. And I went up to Central California, kind of the Central Coast, and shot down over the water. And so if the conditions are good and you have the right setup, you can go really, really far on these bands. And
what's the rough elevation at both ends of that?
Let's see, in Baja it was at the beach, and I was up at a few thousand feet elevation. So I think it was Figueroa Peak maybe.
So over the water, you get a little
Yeah.
bit like knife edge.
You get ducting over the water because of the temperature inversion layers.
Okay.
So yeah, and there's been efforts to make a 10 gigahertz contact to Hawaii. It hasn't happened yet. It may never, but I think it's been done up to 5.7 gigahertz to Hawaii when the conditions are right. So yeah, microwaves can be really, really good. And if you're on mountaintops, you can talk much farther than you would ever imagine on VHF or UHF simplex. Yeah.
So when you're preparing for one of these things, are you guys talking about, I'll be on this hilltop, and I'll be on this hilltop, and I'll be on this hilltop?
Yeah.
And you've already got your headings
Yep.
set up,
Yep.
as well as your azimuth.
Yeah.
So then it's just a matter of coordinating. He's going to be pointing at me, and I'm going to be pointing at him.
Yeah, to a certain extent. So
And then you're going to switch over to a different hilltop.
yeah. So generally speaking, for the month ahead of time, the San Bernardino Microwave Society email list has a lot of traffic where people post their plans, and Mel WA6JBD sort of creates this log of those and publishes them every few days. And so you start to see where people are going to be and what radios they're going to bring with them, and those are plans, right? What ends up happening is usually some percentage of that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of on the fly figuring stuff out. Yeah.
Tony, what is the EIRP of that with the 3-watt amplifier?
It's a lot. Let's see. It's so 3 watts is what, 35 dBm plus another 30 dB. Well, not 30, probably 20 dB. So 55 dBm. That's a lot. Yeah. My bigger radio with the 8 watts and 39 dB of gain is it's well over 100,000 watts ERP.
So that's a couple hundred watts. Of
Easily.
effective
Yeah.
heat.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so you mentioned you were using DMR for coordination in the talk group. What network is that on?
That's on the Western States DMR group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the unfortunate thing is I don't think there is a way to connect a hotspot to that through the internet.
I think it's a DMR market network.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, that's Tony for coming out.
Thank you.
I appreciate Tony taking the time to give his presentation today. I found it very interesting and I learned a lot. Hopefully you did too. Be sure to check out the comment section below for any additional information, such as links and whatever. And be sure to share, like, and subscribe if you think this might be of interest to others. Until next time, 73.